talk security, current affairs, governance, politics, your view, elections, rule of law, economic issues, foreign events on the Talking Point. Talking Point, weekdays on this channel. After years of being shut down, we have been informed that the Portharcourt Refinery has recommenced refining. On Wednesday, the Minister for Petroleum, Honorable Minister for Petroleum, Enang, announced that on Wednesday, and many Nigerians have been looking forward to the recommencement of the Portharcourt Refinery after years of being shut down. Of course, you know what that means. The Tinubu-led administration had made a promise that in December, the Portharcourt Refinery will be up and running, and Wednesday the announcement was made. Are we excited about that? And we're looking forward to what it brings in terms of refining capacity and how it will alleviate to some extent the problems that we've been going through, especially with the issue of refining from outside and the subsidies and so many other problems that we'll be discussing today on the Talking Point. I welcome you to the Talking Point today. My name is Ikechukwu Jue. We're discussing the recommencement of the Portharcourt Refinery having been completed. The mechanical rehabilitation and everything was completed, and on Wednesday the recommencement started. To join me to discuss the conversation today on the Talking Point, but before I tell you about my guest, forgive me please, do well to follow us across our social media platforms on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, as well as some other social media platforms that you will see on your screen. Joining me to discuss the recommencement of the Portharcourt Refinery is an oil and gas expert who will be joining me virtually. I had hosted him here when we both discussed the issue of the deadline, which was in December, and we are in December. A couple more days before Christmas, that news greeted us. Joining me virtually all the way from Abuja, Nigeria, is Dr. Wisdom Enang, an oil and gas expert. Dr. Wisdom, you're welcome.
Hello, Ike. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So how's Abuja today, Dr. Wisdom?
It's good.
Okay. So the last time I hosted you on this show, we both talked about the deadline, how the federal government would, have to meet that deadline. As an expert in the industry, the deadline eventually has been met. How do you feel about the announcement on Wednesday?
I feel very happy, about the fact that we've progressed, at least. But I think it's important to clarify that there's a difference between, what we call in engineering a dry commissioning and what we call a wet commissioning. And I will explain this. The important thing is, the dry commissioning is what they've just done. That's part of the engineering, procurement, commissioning, installation, and commissioning aspect of the project. That's what they've just done, and that's the what's it called? That's the commissioning that has just been done. What is remaining is for the wet commissioning component, which is actually the operation of the facility itself.
Go on, Dr. Wisdom. We can hear you. Yes, go ahead.
So it's from the so we did the wet commissioning. So in terms of looking at what the news has been, I have mixed feelings. The narrative from the journalistic standpoint says the facility is not operational, but the truth is it's not producing anything. It's just been tested mechanically and electrically using. And all the parts are functioning. You've heard the Minister for Oil say we're moving on to phase 2. I think the GMD of NMPC said the same thing, that we're moving on to phase 2. which is now going to be the full wet commissioning and operation. Unfortunately, it's in the last quarter of 2024. So again, we are back to the dilemma we started off with initially.
Okay, Dr. Wisdom, you sound as though the announcement should not excite Nigerians, because you talked about only the mechanical completion as well as some other components there. Full production has not started. You're an expert in the industry. Can you talk to us about what it means to fully get the refinery? Can you hear me, Dr. Wisdom?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, so I said you don't sound excited based on your analysis about this announcement, because listening to you, you said that it was only the mechanical phase that had been completed. So the refinery being fully operational is not exactly what it is. Talk to us about what it means to have the refinery be fully functional.
Okay, so before we have that refinery fully functional, we need to get past the dry commissioning phase into the wet commissioning phase. Then, as I've explained, and then we start operating. But very key of in this is the consistency of crude supply. We need that crude supply to be consistent. Otherwise, you cannot operate the facility. You can load some crude and do some sort of dry run. Yeah, to see if all the parts are okay. But to operate the facility, we need to start digging into details. There's I like to use the saying that the devil is in the details. So the question is, what details have gone into the planning? Have we just quickly done something? Because again, you could paint a narrative that shows operational, and until you're an expert like me, you will not be able to define exactly what operational means. Operational could mean to the layman, oh, they're functional, they're already processing crude. But that's not true, because we already heard from the statement. The moment you sent me this topic, I had to read up what's going on. And 7 hours ago, there was an update where they've given a phase 2 to this, to the project itself. And they've said, I think they have about just under 80% completion rate as at 15th of December. They've given a phase 2 to this, and they said the phase 2 will be completed for the full operations in fourth quarter of 2024. So what that means is that we're still far away. But I think the sense of comfort too, and I did point this out in our last conversation. I said that we need to grill the details. It's not just enough to say operational. What does that mean? Is that operational political in context, or is it kind of a conversation that we have dug very deep, and we've done our research, we've done our study, we've crossed all the T's and dots all the I's to make sure that we have the details required to make it efficient. But I think I've been proven right that the narrative was mainly operational, and to the average person, they're expecting is producing from today. Everyone is asking me, oh, fantastic, we started producing. I'm like, no. Operational means it's been certified as dry completion compliant. We've not gone into the wet completion, our operations of the entire facility. For that, there's a key imperative, which is the sustainability of supply. And we don't know. Already, the Dangote refinery, as we speak, have gotten 2 million, one from Shell, 2 million barrels of crude, one from Shell and one from NMPCL. And it's let's look at the burn rates. If we go at the full capacity of 600,000 liters of processing products per day, we'll burn through that very quickly. Is that enough to represent a well thought through security of supply? That is the question. Do we have enough in terms of security of supply of the crude required to run these facilities? Now we know we haven't started. So my question is it just the completion of phase 2 that is going to eat our lunch? Or is there a more salient or more potent, in reality, problem that we are not talking about, which is the security of supply?
Okay, Dr. Wisdom, That particular project gulp about $1.5 billion, and the capacity has been raised from 60,000 barrels per day to about 150,000 barrels per day. With that amount of money spent to not only turn around but revive the refinery, it takes us back to the issue of TAM, which we have had over time. What are your expectations from the amount of money spent thus far to bring the refinery at least back on track, vis-a-vis the amount of monies we've spent on the other TAMs?
Yeah, I think if I were to just make a decision, I would have put that into building modular refineries. But, whoever thought through this must have done a business case that justifies that. I'm just hoping that the drivers, the fundamentals are that it produces a very well thought through business and not just, political sentiments of saying it's a government-owned refinery. Because if we haven't thought through that entire process, then we will still end up with a TAM, especially if we have not thought through the consistency of supply required to run this. The moment what I'm seeing is a makeshift plan, loading cargoes to tank farms is not going to fix it. We need constant sustainable supply. I'm just talking the case of what's happening to Dangote Refinery, the way they're trying to do their supply situation. That doesn't cut it for me. So I hope this is not what they're planning with this other facility. Fingers crossed, there's not a lot of details out there. To the common man, whatever they put on the newspaper is okay. But the problem is there's a disconnection of conversation between the technical aspect and what the journalists are reporting, which I understand the journalists are not exactly experts in that field. But I think we need to be clear. As I said earlier, I keep saying, for us to get this, honesty is the first imperative that we need as the people. Do we really want to fix this, or do we want a political undertone around the truth, which shouldn't be, really? So I think it is important for us to understand, that to fix this problem, we really need to dig deep. Am I expecting another term? Well, if we don't fix those problems, both the operational and the maintenance issues that come up, on a normal basis, and then we schedule and wait until they become very compounded, then of course we're going to end up with another term. Nothing's going to change. We cannot change the outcome by continuing to behave in the way that we behaved to create the problem in the first instance.
If we collectively, Dr. Wisdom, if we collectively put all the refineries that had to shut down due to the problems, if we put them all together, I recall when I hosted you here in the studio, you talked about the design default, that these refineries were built and what they were handling wasn't exactly the original design. Let's go back to that design default, because you talked about the kind of crude that we have here vis-a-vis the Venezuelan crude. Because in getting this refinery up and running, you just talked about TAM. We hope we don't go back to another TAM. So let's go back to that design default. You think that design default has been addressed, especially with the kind of crude it can handle?
Yeah, I think I would like to believe that they've addressed it, and I think because they have, in one of the write-ups I read, they did talk about the type of crudes that fundamentally it could handle, and it was mainly the light crude, including even the global ones. So where I read it said that Nigeria plans to process 100% of its own crude first, and then import crude for processing afterwards if they've exceeded their capacity. So I think they've addressed that, which is a shame, because we couldn't have recovered all the wasted opportunity costs in the past that we've had in the past. The only thing is for me is I don't believe that there's only one cost for that one causal factor for the TAM. I believe it's a combination of factors, like you pointed out. This is just one of them. I think that it is, having solved this, it is important for us to look at the lessons learned holistically. What's really been eating our lunch, including economic sabotage. The lessons learned cannot exclude, in all honesty, the scenario of economic sabotage, which is, we know, is a recurring decimal in many of the government-sanctioned projects. So I think it's for us to avoid a repeated term, whether it be for technical reasons or for political reasons, or for reasons of sabotage. I think we really need to get down and do some real study. I see a lot of the narrative, and I'm seeing people, I see the authorities trying to manage that narrative. It's more of a sending, not sending a black or white, you're sending a gray area. So you're kind of leaving people to decide whether is it gray or is it more black or is it more white. And that's my problem. What it is right now is we've done dry commissioning. We're nowhere near operating that facility from what I've read. And we're not going to be near. If the from experience, if the government says we're going to be able to start up in fourth quarter, to run it, if we don't fix the supply situation, I'm thinking more of first quarter 2025. Look at the AKK project. Look at other projects. They have more of a moving timeline. So I think the government needs to do a lot more to communicate the details clearly so that it is not misleading.
Okay. Let us talk about one of the problems that, we may be confronted with, which is the issue of maintenance. Having spent this much money, $1.5 billion, to get it, up and running, do you have any fear, especially with regards to maintenance, which has always been the problem before this refinery's eventually packed up?
Yeah, I think I have a general fear for the maintenance culture in Nigeria. And I'm a Nigerian, I love my country, but I say we need to point out what is not going on right. But I also have a solution. So I come in with the fear, and I understand it's a cultural challenge. Sometimes the mantra we use is we don't fix it until it breaks, but sometimes we don't also quantify or put into context or have cognizance of the consequences of the failure. And when you're looking at two risks, looking at the consequences and the probability of failure, there are two things there. The consequences of failure means that we lose our crude volumes. We lose our petroleum derivative products, PMS, diesel. We lose that, and we go into shortage shock or supply shock. The probability of that happening is very high if we have a terrible maintenance culture. What is my way of advice to the government? It's a way I learned a couple of years ago when I worked under a number of maintenance projects. It's called the PDRR. What that means is P is for predict, D is for detect, R is for respond, the other R is for recover. The P for predict simply means that you put out a predictive model. And predictive model, it doesn't need to be AI, it doesn't need to be Internet of Things. Predictive model could be as simple as we have boots on ground assessing, looking at what we call the operating, log of the refinery. So we are looking at it, is it operating within the right envelope? And by envelope, I mean the recommended conditions that the manufacturers asked us to operate this machine. Are we able to operate that machine at the required envelope? That's the first and important thing that we need to do. The second thing that we need to do is to detect the problem. If we've seen trends, we've predicted trends, can we run analysis, and whether it just be visual analysis and the problem? If you see that the oil, for example, of a certain compartment is getting lighter, does that, Pastor Moino would say, see something, say something. Have you seen something? Have you done an analysis? Have you said something? That is the detect aspect of it. The respond and the recover has more to do with, do you have a procedure for responding to the defects or the challenges that you found to make sure this maintenance is effected efficiently and effectively. That is very important, and at the right time, so that you don't have to have a bigger consequence of failure. The next one is, do you have a response and recovery plan? So if it gets to the bad point, do you have a plan to actually recover? So things like, do you have a response team in place for respond and recover? Do you have spares, what we call critical spares for equipment? Do you have, what's the log of it? Do you wait until your critical spares are out of stock before you begin to respond to an emergency? Or do you have a stock level, what we call minimum stock levels, that if they get to that level, you're already sounding an alarm that we need to order more critical spares? It's really commonsensical. Anybody that has a passion and conscience to serve this country has, you don't need to be a technical person. You just need to ask the right questions. We are there, the technical folks, to lend our voice to the converse. So, I've just laid out in a very simple minute, the procedure I would take: predict, detect, respond, recover. Simple and short. You get a very watertight. I'm telling you, companies like ExxonMobil, Shell, Chevron, Total, that is exactly what they use it, just in a different nomenclature. But it covers the entire spectrum of PDRR: predict, detect, respond, recover. That's what we need.
All right. Well spoken, Dr. Wisdom. One aspect of this conversation that we must also look at are the phasal works going on with, the refinery. Initially, we had expected that in December it will be up and running, from what we were told. But from this phasal announcements we're hearing, give and take, give a timeline. What do you foresee in terms of, actual timeline for these refineries to be up and running, especially, first off, the Portharcourt Refinery, because the other ones will follow after this?
I think we would need up to first quarter of 2025, and I have my
Isn't that too far? Isn't that too far, Dr. Wisdom? Nigerians cannot wait till 2025.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's my opinion based on my assessment, but I understand that, as a professional, I have that expectations to be very honest and tell you my basis. I'm not being pessimistic, I'm being a realist. And the reason is, already what's the best we're having with Dangote Refinery? We're carrying cargoes of 1 million every other, few days down to the Dangote Refinery to even start up that refinery and try and see how we operate. We haven't even had a public conversation about how we intend to ensure the security of supply for the Portharcourt Refinery, let alone the other refineries. I'm worried, and I'm worried for good reasons, because the devil is in the details. The startup date is not magical. It is, so there's something we used to do in project management. When I'm managing projects, I always ask anyone that is scheduling and drawing my project schedule to tell me the critical path. The critical path analysis is the set of operations that would be the longest in the entire value chain of the project activities, and would almost be the determinant factor for defining how long the project would be. And along that critical path analysis, I see security of supply. Do what you want to do. If you don't have security of supply, you aren't going nowhere. And I don't think security of supply is just something you flip your fingers and get it overnight. It means that, let's take let's pretend we're all engineers for once and look at the law of conservation of matter. He simply says that you can't create or destroy anything, but you can take it from one form to the other. Why am I putting the law here? It simply means we are not increasing our production levels in Nigeria. We're not. We're not doing more exploration. We're not doing more enhanced recoveries as of now and in the foreseeable future. So what does that mean? The only credit I can take for the security of supply is that we are only transforming that supply from another direction to the refinery's direction. What does that mean? We need to cancel several contracts. If we have a domestic supply obligation that was already, quote unquote, active, we need to give it a terminal period before we terminate it. You don't just terminate it instantly. If you had if you had different, say, export obligations, you can't just say, because you have a startup, that we need to redirect that crude almost instantly. There is a break-off clause for which you would have to follow the mandate of that clause. So what I'm trying to say in essence is to be able to activate all the break-off clauses for the various contracts and free of these these volumes for the domestic market, it would take time. So I see on the critical path analysis, the most critical, what people don't realize is that domestic supply obligation being secured sustainably. And if we don't secure it, I don't see us doing it in 2024, because the problem I'm having, IK, and I respect the fact that, as a professional, I have to speak out the truth, is that we are working things in series. We're working things we're not working things in parallel. I should be hearing conversations like, okay, we are at this point of our phase-out startup, but we have already started working in parallel the other imperatives that will make sure this date is a must. The date means nothing without some framework of confidence to back it up.
Long analysis there, Dr. Wisdom. Another aspect of this particular, Portharcourt Refinery recommencement is, will it now address, by the time, going by your analysis, the issue of getting our refineries up and running so that we do not continue with the importation of, a crude oil finished products? Will it now critically address that conversation, especially with stopping importation at whatever time it starts?
I think it would not get that far, just simply by simple mathematics.
Are you not being, Dr. Wisdom, are you not being perhaps too pessimistic? I know you're an engineer, you're an oil and gas expert. This is your field, but you're being perhaps very pessimistic, don't you think?
I think there's a difference between qualitative analysis and quantitative analysis. Qualitative analysis says it is startup. We started the refinery up. But for me, I go a step deeper. As I said, the devil is in the details. And a step deeper is, we started up, what dates, what imperatives have we completed, what is on our hot list item to complete post-startup, what are the imperatives still left to be, kind of framed up on. The next thing I would like to ask is, what is the capacity? So even if you take a commonsensical approach and say, well, what is our daily consumption, although that is also questionable on daily basis, and what is the capacity of this refinery? It doesn't scratch that surface. But let me tell you what it would do. It would balance the supply, equation within the regional market. And I'm talking about starting with Portharcourt and the entire South by extension. It would do that definitely. Would see some real benefits. Again, those benefits would have to depend on the way we firm up the remaining details. For example, what is the contractual approach? Are we pricing the crude in Naira? Are we pricing in dollars at the government set exchange rate? Are we pricing in dollars and they have to source the dollars from the black market and buy? All this will affect the pricing and will ultimately affect the way that price modulates the entire market. That's the way I would say it. But we expect some modulating effects on the regional markets. If we're able to get that pricing right, it should give us some discount and security of supply. But it will scratch the surface when it comes to Nigeria. Dangote Refinery on the other side, we know the throughput of 600,000, I think that's what they said, per day, I think. But we don't know 600,000, how many of that is actually going to be crude, how many of that, PMS, how many of that is diesel, and it's very difficult to tell at this stage because it's a function of the design of the facility as well as the grade of crude that you are passing through, and all the different crudes come through. Well, they call them running lights collectively, most of them, but you have to understand that they come from different reservoirs, they have different properties, and the different ratios of refining is gotten from the different reservoirs. So until we start getting some
Dr. Wisdom, I don't know if you can hear me, Dr. Wisdom, but we're having a little technical issue with the audio there whilst we try to recover the audio. I'd like to crave your indulgence. Let's listen to what the Honorable Minister for Petroleum, Heineken Lopobiri, said about the recommencement of the Portharcourt Refinery. Let's take a listen.
A very unique day. You could recall that we ought to have held this TECO meeting sometime in the month of November. But for some reason, maybe by providence, I was outside the country, GCO2 was outside the country, EVP was outside the country. Most of us were outside the country, and so we couldn't hold this TECO. We rescheduled, and then something happened again, we were not in the country. And then eventually we resolved that it's better for us to hold today's TECO. That will coincide, with the commencement of operations, of the Portharcourt Refinery. So, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to bore you anymore because, people who have spoken before me have spoken what I would have said, but just to announce to Nigerians that the fulfillment of our pledge, to bring on stream phase 1 of the Portharcourt Refinery by the end of 2023, and the subsequent streaming of the phase 2 in 2024, we heartily announce the mechanical completion of flare startup on the 20th of December 2023. This heralds the commencement of production of petroleum products after the Christmas break. We want to thank Nigerians for their patience and the trust on the NNPC to deliver on our promise and mandate on the rehabilitation of our refineries. This is also another landmark for the renewed hope agenda of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration.
You've heard the Honorable Minister of Petroleum there, Heineken Lopobiri, talk about the recommencement of the Portharcourt Refinery. Dr. Wisdom Enang is our guest. We're having him virtually. We had a technical slight audio issue, but he's back, and I'd like to bring him on so we can conclude this conversation. Dr. Wisdom, moving forward, as an expert in the industry, what advice would you give the government, especially on this path that they're on? Because Nigerians are eagerly awaiting a fulfilled promise. Recall that the last administration had promised that they will get our refineries functional, but the Tinubu-led administration have actually been the only ones, the Tinubu-led administration, to, grab the bull by the horn. So what advice do you have for the Nigerian government, especially in getting the refineries up and functional?
Yeah, I think the Nigerian government are running against it. I need to say this, that they're running against a very tough timeline, which they've set for themselves, but that means they need to get to work to meet that. Because I'm going to start from saying I belong to the most influential oil and gas groups in the entire country. And I'm talking about oil and gas group where the ministers are there and all the decision makers, including the GMD of NNPC is also there. And a news of the refinery startup was pasted, and out of about 50 comments, 39 were negative comments. Oh, we don't believe it. Don't worry. Look, when do we think this is going to be realistic? starts and are they going to keep their promises? The problem I'm having is the Nigerians have generally lost that the pride of the brand of Nigeria in them, and the government needs to work very hard to recover that brand, because we've lost it. If we've been beaten too many times, that is almost a trauma and a post-traumatic distress to the average Nigerian when they hear these things. So the government needs to get the details. It's not enough. When I look at the narrative on the newspapers, on the news blogs, I'm almost forced to think that we're playing with qualitative data, that it's almost in a way that journalists are going to interpret it wrongly and send that wrong narrative to the people. And that's dangerous, because you're further adding insult to the wounds. So let's get clear. Let's bring some objective data to complement the subjective, the qualitative data, and then tell people exactly where we are, what's going on, what's the hold-up, and when we expect to start up. Let's not treat this like the political narrative of, oh, we would do it third quarter. What does that even mean? Do we even have a target, like a proper schedule with a date? What does third quarter mean? Is it at the beginning of October or at the end of December 2024? What does that mean? And is there a potential for a spillover? How much float is in that schedule? So there are questions I ask as an expert, but also understand that I'm just about, I represent 15% of the population, or if not less, who are experts in who are elites, but experts should be less than 5% of the population of the country. So, I feel the Nigerian government needs to do a lot, primarily to restore confidence of Nigerians in the project Nigeria, so they take ownership. And secondarily, to get a refinery started up. I have to put the other one primary, because that is the basis of engaging in the conversation. We need to be Nigerians first before we take ownership of whatever project that Nigeria births and brings forward.
All right, Dr. Wisdom, and before we conclude this conversation, you've really spoken a lot, especially about the recommencement of the Portharcourt Refinery. As your parting shot, you're a Nigerian, of course. I'd like to urge you to perhaps applaud the Tinubu administration, as I did say before, because of course we've been down this road for a long time. We've had these refineries packed up for a long time. None of the former leaders had, the guts to take a decisive action about it. But as your parting shot, what would you say to Nigerians who are actually eagerly awaiting coming out of this whole importation menace? What advice do you have?
I tell Nigerians that if we gotta do it, we have to do it the right way, and the right way is going to take some time. I'd like Nigerians to exercise patience, because if we push too hard against a deadline or target that is not feasible, we'll end up with disappointment at best, and at worst, we're going to end up with series of another term. But we need to also ask the government to reciprocate that with clear communication. Right. We do respect the fact that the Tinubu administration has charted the course, very frankly, by taking the bull by the horn, and we like that aspect, but we want it to be matched with sustainability, so that we can have a more long-term benefit. So I'd like to say, Nigerians, let's be patient. For the NNPC, I'd like them to hasten up their short to medium term stopgap plans, whilst to make sure that there's at least security of supply. Even if we cannot modulate the pricing of imported products, let's not have that scarcity, which is typically what we have during the festive seasons, year on year by experience. So let's put everything together, the short term, the medium term, and the long term plans. And I'd like to ensure for more confidence of Nigerians in the project Nigeria, as we we kind of restart our nation's economy.
All right.
I think that those will be my parting shots.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Wisdom Enang, oil and gas expert, for providing your expertise to this conversation. We hope that as we continue to follow developments, when we call on you to at least come and give analysis, you will avail us your time.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So that's Dr. Wisdom Enang, of course, analyzing the situation there, especially with the announcement of the recommencement of the Portharcourt Refinery. Well, give kudos to the Tinubu-led administration, as I did say in that analysis there, for taking the bull by the horn, for trying to get something done. Well, I do hope that people in quarters who have watched this program have taken one or two from the analysis provided there by Dr. Wisdom Enang, an oil and gas expert, especially with, approaches to this issue and tackling the issue holistically as it should be. Well, that's the much we can do for the program for today. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Let's continue to be hopeful as we look forward to better days. By the way, compliments of the season and Merry Christmas to you in advance. My name is Ike Chikujiwe. As always, I'll leave with a prayer. God bless Nigeria and a salute to you. It's bye for now. Let's talk security, current affairs, governance, politics, your view, elections, rule of law, economic issues, foreign